Hello and welcome to another Friday episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
And I'm Evan Grant.
And as we're taping our episode here, the Rangers are playing the Brewers in the third of their three-game series at Globe Life Field, Evan. Texas has won the first two games. They've cut the lead in the AL West, their deficit behind the Astros, to 2.5 games. And they've played great baseball here over this homestand.
Well, on the first take, which has been already edited, John mentioned that this was a big series, which I'm glad in the second version you took that out because everything is a big series the rest of the way. But for them to go out and win the first two games with Milwaukee and win that series, put that away, that was huge for them. The road does not get any easier. I think the Rangers had when I looked yesterday, they had the 7th hardest remaining strength of schedule in the big leagues. They've still got the most challenging schedule among all the contenders, according to Tankathon. But they're defying every projection and expectation. You know, they are winning with a team where you really do. And I'm going to help program sales out here, John, because you need a program now to tell all the players apart. But they are
working on it.
Whatever you want to call them. You want to call them the Little Rascals like David Murphy, our guest today, has referenced them. You want to call them the All-American Rejects. You want to call them the Rookies. Whatever you want to call them, they're getting the job done somehow. They are executing, and it's been fun to watch.
So we'll talk about that a little bit with David Murphy, who is our guest today, the former Rangers outfielder and current TV analyst who's really come a long way and become a really good analyst.
Despite your presence.
Well, I taught him all he knew early on in the.
That's why he's gotten better. He's forgotten all that stuff.
And then for our archives in Arlington today, several of you have mentioned, because I teased this last week, the 7-inning save, and we'll talk about that. Plus, I will also reference an anniversary. I do have an anniversary this week.
I'm glad for an anniversary, because I was going to ask you, what is our anniversary this week? This is, unfortunately, the anniversary week of September 11th, and John and I both had memories from that day when we were with the club in San Francisco and the very unsettling feelings that we all had and then being stranded in San Francisco for 3 days. But let's get into this club right now.
So feel free to reach out to both of us on X. I'm at Ranger Blake, and Evan is at Evan P. Grant.
Bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
And as we said, we're getting into the content. The Rangers have won 2 out of 3 against the Astros. They got smoked on Saturday, but
bounced right back.
But they bounced back against the Brewers with big wins on Monday and Tuesday. So just where do you make of it, where we're at right now as we speak?
I mean, listen, Monday and Tuesday, could anybody have a better 24 hours in baseball than Michael Helman did with, you know, a grand slam in his first ever at bat with the bases loaded, to basically put that game away, had all 5 RBIs in that game.
Threw a runner out at second.
The next day, he comes out, makes a home run robbing catch in the top of the 5th, and even though Milwaukee went on to score 3 runs in the top of the 5th, then he comes back out with a 2-run home run to put the Rangers right back into a tie game in the bottom of the 5th. And that's a 24-hour span. It was incredible. And, you know, we talked to Helman after the game on Tuesday night, and he tried, but he was exhausted because he didn't sleep on Monday night after all that adrenaline was rushing through him. And 2, I just don't think even he had a comprehension of what those 24 hours have been like for a guy who had been designated for assignment and put on waivers twice and had changed teams since February from Minnesota to St. Louis to Pittsburgh and finally to the Rangers.
And this is not a young guy. He's 29 years old, who finally made his major league debut last year with 8 games in Minnesota. So, but these are the kind of guys in a pennant race that you know, the unexpected sometimes
and this is
what works.
This is a guy, and, you know, I'm gonna laud a couple of scouts here Mike Grouse, who I think is the longest tenured Rangers baseball operations employee.
I believe that is the case at this point.
The scout who was responsible for Ian Kinsler, the scout who was responsible for Travis Hafner. He had made a recommendation about Mike Helman. Also, Mike Anderson, who has been here a long time, made a recommendation about Michael Helman. And the Rangers had interest in him going back to last year. And then Mike Parnell, we've mentioned Mike on a couple of previous podcasts, who's done a superb job of first, I think, really as the director or in charge of professional scouting. This team has done a great job in the free agent market with pitching over the last 6 or 8 years. And Mike's been a point man on that, and he's also, kind of the guy who is in charge of finding these, for lack of a better term, hidden gems. He was a big advocate for Helman, and the Rangers liked the fact that this was a guy, because if you look back to this, John, the last time they were 2.5 games out was May 18th, and as we tape this, they're May 19th, they put in the waiver claim or got awarded Michael Helman. And to do that, they DFA'd Jonathan Ornelas. Well, DFAing Jonathan Ornelas put Cody Freeman more on the map as a potential middle infield, second base, shortstop, third base, really second and third type of utility guy. And they brought in Helman because they wanted another center fielder who could potentially pair with Sam Haggerty if Evan Carter wasn't going to be healthy all year. So that was the real attraction for Helman, and those guys had made that determination. And I don't know how long he can keep it up, but let's put it this way. For the Rangers to get to the playoffs, he needs to keep it up about 10 days, and that's not too much to ask of anybody.
Right, and as we've talked, when you never know how a season's going to go with injuries and decline of performance. And you look at, Dylan Moore is another guy, Rowdy Tellez, who they came up. Even a guy like Caleb Bosley, who just got claimed, but a guy that ate up innings this year. And none of these guys were near the Sam Haggerty's another one. And these are the kind of guys you kind of need. You don't usually see it quite this, but
you don't see it this pronounced.
Right.
But every element of the organization, I think, has been represented well here, because Cody Freeman was a drafted and developed guy who really hasn't ever been on any top prospect list.
He was a catcher. He came up as a catcher.
Was converted to catcher early on, was going to follow in the footsteps of Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. But he's shown much better hitting skills. And listen, he's got a throwback approach in the clubhouse that is very beyond his years.
Yep.
And I can't overstate that. It's been really pronounced, I think. Tellez is a guy who had a connection to the Rangers with his father-in-law being Doug Davis, the AAA manager, but he didn't want to play that. And when he got released by Seattle, the Rangers came calling because they needed some veteran depth in the minor league system. Haggerty was a guy who was non-tendered last year by Seattle, was coming back from an Achilles injury. Your medical department, your rehab group, and your scouting people all really liked him a lot. And so you look at all those different pieces. Helman, we've already been over. And even to the fact that, like, the spring training, late spring pickup of Patrick Corbin, which, was mostly a desperation play at that point because the club had lost John Gray and Cody Bradford. But they were able to swoop in really quickly, find some things they liked about Corbin, and got him done really, really fast. And he's come in here and he's been the unsung hero of the staff because of the innings he's soaked up.
Well, before we talk a little bit about the guys that are not playing right now and when your thought is on when they can come back, the other thing to me that has been so noticeable in these first 2 games against the Brewers, and the Brewers have the best record in the majors as we talk, they don't make a lot of mistakes. Monday night, they made 3 mistakes, 2 on the bases. Turang drops that pop-up, and the Rangers are able to capitalize on all of those mistakes. And it's just the way it goes sometimes.
And that, maybe because they had so many, I hate using words like breaks, but maybe there were so many times that they didn't capitalize on breaks early in the season that the law of averages is now catching up. And so it's tilted much heavier in the short term in the Rangers' favor. But yeah, to your point, it is a great observation that this is a team that was handed opportunities plenty of other times this year and just didn't seize them. And I think there's a ton of elements that go into all of that, and I don't know that I could possibly touch on them all. I don't think that you can sit here and say, well, these guys replaced Corey Seager and Marcus Simeon and Adolis Garcia.
Right.
But I do think that there is, when you're talking about journeymen or not heralded prospects, they're willing to do anything that it takes to try and win a game. And those are lower percentage plays for established stars, but they are the only way that utility guys stick around. And that's what we're seeing from these guys. There's an execution in situations to squeeze out at least one run. And if the inning turns bigger, great, rather than playing for a big inning that may turn into nothing.
So Rangers are 30-42 on the road as you get ready to fly to New York on 9/11, as we talked about, which is crazy.
Yeah.
They were 4-2 on the last road trip. They've had 2 winning trips, all against teams with losing records. They've got to win, and Jacob deGrom will take the ball on Friday night at Citi Field.
Yeah, and I mean, he's expecting kind of a playoff crowd atmosphere on Friday night, and that'll definitely be interesting. I think he's going to get. I think this is how it's going to go. He's going to get cheered when he gets introduced before the game. He will be ridden hard during the game, and then and you as the spin master would know better than I. But there's going to be certainly there's going to be a video tribute to Jacob deGrom while the Rangers are in New York, and I think tradition basically holds if a guy pitches the first game, it's the second game that they run that.
Right,
so and then he'll get, I would imagine, a very hearty ovation during that. So that'll be interesting. But on that front, the Rangers' 2 winning road trips, well, 3 if you count the 2-1 Cincinnati trip early in the year. Right. But they've been against losing clubs, and they've got to play well against winning clubs. But to that point, John, they won 2 out of 3 from Houston. They've won the series, regardless of what happens as we tape this on Wednesday, against the team with the best record in baseball. And so they are, the numbers from the season are what they are. But right now, I would suggest this is a different club than they were the start of August.
And they need 1 win in Houston to be able to bring the silver boot back to Arlington. And that boot has aged quite a bit since it was last in Arlington.
Well, is this the second or third boot?
This is actually the third boot.
Because the first one was broken.
No, the first one was actually a leather boot that we used when we were playing them in exhibition games.
Okay.
And that got stolen.
Then the glass one got broken.
Right. And then you have this thing.
Didn't this one, the silver, the actual silver boot, when we finally decided to make it a silver boot, did it get lost for a while?
No, not really. I think we're running. I don't know what the Astros have done for the last, 7 or 8 years now since that thing has been in Arlington, but it has those little plates on it. So I don't know if the Astros every year have gone in and,
the Astros have owned the series for a while.
Right. 2016 was the last time we won the series, and we won it 13.
And, that's one of the questions I get asked about most is how can I see the silver boot?
Well, it's in the gift shop at Dakin Field or whatever it is now. Dakin Park in Houston, and I've talked to our people down there. I'm not over this anymore. I said, just make sure if you guys win on Friday or Saturday, you go in and grab that boot.
And listen, I know that this is a big deal for you, but a small asterisk is if the Rangers can win one of the 3 games in Houston, they really need to win the series.
They do need
but if they can win one of the 3, they will own the tiebreaker against the Astros.
That's probably more important than the
That
silver
might be
boot
more
this
important.
year.
Now, what I am working on, and I know you've got all the tiebreaker scenarios, but the one that I now want to run by Major League Baseball is in the unlikely circumstance that the Rangers, Astros, Mariners, and Cleveland all tie with the same records. Then you have a 3-way tie in the American League West, which I think would go to Seattle because it would have better records against both the Rangers and Astros.
Right.
So then the Astros, Rangers, and Guardians would be in a 3-way tie. And if the Rangers can win 1 game against the Astros and 1 game against Cleveland at least, they would have better records against those 2 teams. And I think that would give the Rangers the wild card.
It's never really come into play since the 3rd wild card was instituted.
There's never been a team with the same record as a playoff team that didn't get in.
That didn't get in. So it'll be interesting. And again, as we talk, the Guardians are still only 2.5 back. They've won their first 2 games in their series against Kansas City.
They're a game back of the Rangers as we do this. The Rangers are a game and a half back of Seattle, and they're 2.5 back of Houston. And Seattle's obviously a game behind Houston at this point.
And the Rangers play their last 3 games of the season in Cleveland. So who knows?
And one other thing, I posted this online on Wednesday morning, a look at the schedules for all the contenders. But the Astros have a really key week next week. They have the Rangers coming in for 3, and they have Seattle coming in right behind them for 3. And I would suggest as much, if the Rangers can hold their – if as we record this, and I'm sorry to keep dropping that in, but if they can split these games, the last game with the Brewers and the 3 with the Mets, if they can go 2-2 and then go 4-2 next week against Houston, and then at home against Minnesota, Miami.
Yep.
I would suggest that the Rangers will emerge from that week with holding a playoff spot, because one of the 2 teams ahead of them is going to lose at least twice.
Yep.
So there's opportunity to pick up games next weekend.
So we'll see what happens. But as we bid Evan before we bid Evan a fond adieu, we have to finish the rest of our podcast here. And as we said, our guest this week is David Murphy, played 10 years in the big leagues. And I keep mentioning this. The Rangers fleeced the Red Sox when they traded for Murph at the trading deadline in 2007. They got Kaysen Gabbard and David Murphy for Eric Gagne, who the Rangers had masterfully pitched just enough in the first half of that season to have him have a pretty dominant record. And he did not pitch well for Boston. But Murph had a great career with the Rangers, was part of some great teams. And he'll talk a little bit. We're going to talk to him a little bit about how he got into broadcasting, and he may be the most notable ex-Ranger player to be a broadcaster here on game broadcasts in quite a long time. So we'll talk to David Murphy next on SportsDay Rangers. Our guest on this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers, a familiar face to especially those in TV land the last couple of years, especially David Murphy, played in the major leagues 10 years with the Red Sox, started, and then a long run here in Texas, was part of the World Series teams, played in over 1,100 games with a .274 career average. And now a familiar face, as I was saying, in the Rangers TV booth. And Murph, I think that's where I want to start, is you came off the field after 2015. And what was your first impetus to get into the broadcasting side when your kids were still pretty young?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the game. And first of all, thanks for having me. And so I went to spring training in 2016, and the Rangers had me out in June that year after I had ended up retiring. And I talked to JD, and he and Thad Levine said, let us know if you're interested in doing something with the organization. Good organizations have active alumni. So I had breakfast with JD probably the following December or January, and he asked, what areas that I might be interested in getting into. And as much as appealing as the coaching side was and all the on-field stuff, I think the travel that would be required and maybe the time spent wasn't appealing, because I did have young kids still. And so, we started small on the broadcasting side. I believe JD contacted you pretty soon after that. I did 26 games on the pre-post side my first year in 17, and I did 5 games of color at AA Frisco with Jared Sandler. And that was kind of just the beginning. I think I added about 10 or 15 games a year from there. And I got up to as many as, I want to say I did like 82 games in 2021. So I've kind of fluctuated from there. And, it's gotten to the point where the last few years it's been mainly color, and I've really enjoyed it.
I've told you this before. I really like your voice on the air. I think you've got a good voice for this. I think you've got a great tone in the way you deliver information. And how much of an adjustment has it been, David? To talk about the game at a level where you're explaining it to people who don't think it at the same level that you do.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, first of all. That when I started doing pre and post game stuff, that was pretty easy. Like that was the extension of me still being a baseball fan. I still watch baseball, I read about baseball. So that was kind of a regurgitation of, what I read and look at on a daily basis. And there's not as much time constraints. If you go long in the A block, they can adjust in the B or the C block. When I started doing color, you operate a little bit more under the constraint of time, whether it's the open or, understanding when to talk or not talk during a play, not starting a story with 2 outs in an inning because it's probably going to end pretty quickly. So there's a little bit more of an education and a method to doing color. And I think that's why I like it so much, is because it feels like more of a challenge to me. And obviously, as a former professional athlete, I want to be challenged, especially in an arena that I love.
I think as we've seen this season play out, David, and I want to move into the season a little bit, we've also seen like you go from analytics and technical stuff to a point where it's like, just find a way to win the game. I don't care what you got to do. I don't care how you do it. Find a way to win the game. And I'm interested in your take, because I know we've talked a little bit about this as the season's gone on. How have you seen this team kind of adjust as the season has gone on with faces that aren't familiar and that don't have, maybe the same skill sets?
The biggest thing, if I'm going to point to one thing that, the first few series that I did in April and May, and when I would turn on the TV and watch the team, I just feel like as an offense, your job is to put up runs first and foremost, right? That's how you win the game. You put up runs. But beyond that, you've got to make a pitcher work. Like, you've got to make him uncomfortable out there, and you've got to, put some type of fear in him that he's thinking, man, like, these guys are tough outs, or that, this lineup is hard to roll through. And how often in the first few months of the season was it the 5th inning and the starting pitcher was still in there with 60 or 65 pitches, maybe less? And how many times did the Rangers have at bats where it would be a second pitch weak ground out, a first pitch pop up, a third pitch, wasted at bat, whatever it was? So I think as the season has gone on, they've done a lot better job of, I guess, if, we've got Milwaukee here in town, and they're the model of what it is to make pitchers work. They don't swing early in counts. They have a high contact rate. They don't have a high whiff rate. They really make pitchers work for a team that doesn't hit a lot of home runs. And the Rangers are kind of neck and neck. The Rangers are right ahead of them. I believe they're tied for 17th in homers. Milwaukee's 19th. But I feel like that's one thing. And that's why, I guess if I'm going to point to one guy, like, I feel like I noticed the difference in the lineup when Evan Carter finally got healthy and was back in, because we would see some 7 and 8 pitch at bats. We would see, a count, a guy, whether it was Evan or somebody else, go 0-2 and then work the count back to 3-2. Even if you get out, like, that's making a pitcher work. And then we saw more hits. We've seen an uptick recently in the power department, which I think is what the front office planned on from the very beginning. So obviously the story and what was written early on and what we expected, that didn't come to fruition, but it's paying off here lately. And I know they put themselves in a hole, but hopefully they end the season strong and they get in there, because they're fun to watch right now.
Murph, this team all year, defensively and obviously the pitching side, has been off the charts. If the Rangers had had that kind of pitching, and we had good pitching in 10, 11, and 12, but we didn't have this kind of pitching, right? But they don't seem to beat themselves. They haven't beaten themselves much all year defensively or on the mound. What can you say about kind of the way the team has played fundamentally, aside from some of the offensive stuff?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, from the pitching standpoint, we've had some decent staffs that put up good numbers in the past, but we haven't also had like names. We haven't had DeGrom and Evaldi and beyond, and all of those guys are piggybacking. Jack Leiter is, a prize prospect that's getting it done at the major league level. So there's just depth beyond depth. I feel like the Merrill Kelly trade was huge, and that's just to name a few. So many guys are getting it done in the bullpen. But defense is huge, and that's why the Rangers are where they are. Teams win with pitching and defense. Offense comes and goes. For a lot of the season, it hasn't been there. It is there right now, but they kind of set the tone and the foundation. And you look at these guys and how steady they are across the diamond. I mean, Corey Seager, he's known for his offense, but the numbers are off the charts as far as what he's done defensively this year. Marcus Semien works his tail off, and he's been great at second. Adolis has been really good out there and right. He, before the injury, he's been moving well most of the year, better than he did last year, and we've seen that pay off in results. And so many other guys are getting it done, whether it's Young at third base. Langford has really done a really good job, especially as a guy that came into the big leagues. People didn't expect much from him defensively. So all around the diamond, there's guys that are producing and catching the ball and throwing it well across the diamond.
There has been no defensive liability on the field this year. Nowhere around the diamond do you look whoever's gone out there and feel like you've got a defensive liability. On the pitching side, I was looking at this last night. The rotation ERA is now, as we tape this, is 3.29 for the year. And I went back and I looked since 2000 in the American League, and I only use the American League because we still had 20 years of a DH where they were facing. This is on pace to be the third best rotation ERA since 2000 for 162 game season. So it's not just something that the Rangers haven't had. This is one of the best rotation numbers of this quarter of this century to date.
Yeah.
It's been fun to watch. I mean, it really has been. It's been fun to watch them play on defense. It's been fun to watch them pitch. It's just been, I think, for everybody who's been around the team, there has been a long stretch where it was just so frustrating to watch an offense that wasn't capitalizing on opportunities. I think one thing that the narrative has kind of gleaned towards recently is energy, that there's more energy, right? And you and I both know this. Energy and success go hand in hand. But what have you noticed about just the way this team has gone about things over the last month? And can you speak to that, like coefficient of energy being added?
I don't know. Back to numbers, it's not something that you can quantify, but when you infuse energy into a team, they're more exciting to watch. You can see the domino effect in the way that it trickles through all the guys in the clubhouse, on the team. We had plenty of it. We had plenty of personality in our groups. I think this team as a whole, there are a lot of guys that are just naturally even keeled, and that's a good place to be for a baseball player when you don't get too high or too low. But it's good to have, I guess if we're talking about constructing a lineup, right? Like you need some power guys, you need some speed guys, you need a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So when we get some of these younger guys coming up that can infuse that energy into the team, it's great to see, like I said, the domino effect in that dugout, out on that field. I mean, Cody Freeman, he's probably, I'll point to him first and foremost. Like, I just love watching the guy play baseball. Like, you could see the pure joy in his body language and on his face. Like, he's in the big leagues, and he's not taking a minute of it for granted. And, yeah, that's rubbing off on his teammates. So, he's just one example. But, this team has been really fun to watch here of late.
Yeah, I talked to Ian Kinsler last week, because Cody was on the MLB Network, and he cited Kinsler I talked to Ian, and you can imagine what Ian thinks of the kid.
Yeah.
But that leads me to this question: Who was the bigger? What's the right word here? We'll just call him spark plug or firecracker, to quote you, Kinsler or Pedroia.
Gosh, I think both of them impacted me in very similar ways. I probably, because I got to play with Ian for a lot longer, I'll probably say Ian. But in the same way, that would have been, one of the next names that I brought up. And I think more than anything, I loved the way that Ian ran the bases. From a pure speed perspective, he was an average to slightly above average runner. And you're talking about a guy that got the absolute most out of his talent package. And similar from a power perspective. Like, he wasn't a guy that was going to go put on a show during batting practice, but he was a guy that could hit 30 home runs because he could square up a fastball. But I love the edge that he played with out on the field. He was a great defensive second baseman. He was always dirty. He impacted our teams as much as anybody did, and he just had that, that I guess we've been talking about this Little Rascals team. Like, he had that Little Rascal type of mindset, just mischievous. I'm not following the rules. I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to go out there and kind of leave everything out there on the field.
I want to talk a little bit about this year. We've been able to honor Elvis, Hall of Fame, and we did the statue for Beltray a couple of weeks ago. And every time this group gets together from the 10, 11, 12 era, it's like you guys are back together. It doesn't seem like 14 or 15 years has gone by. That group is still very close, and talk about that just a little bit, about how that group has been able to that over all these years.
Yeah. Gosh, I love seeing all those guys. Whether it's at the ballpark, whether it's at a golf tournament, or you randomly run into them, or just text message. Michael, Ian, Colby, Darren Oliver, Derek Holland, so many of these names, even a guy like Craig Gentry, that I run into a pretty good amount. Like, it immediately takes you back. And I don't know about them. I don't know what perspective they would have on it, but post-career, you're involved in a lot of different things. And for me, like, we're involved in so many different things with our family and our kids, that where we have different community outside the game, right? But the second that I get to see or catch up with one of those guys, it just, there's something so refreshing and joyful about it, because, man, those were some of the best years of my life. They were definitely the best years of my career. And I'm so thankful. Like, there's a lot of guys that have the opportunity to play in the big leagues, whether it's for a minute or whether it's for 5 to 10 years. And they don't necessarily get to play for a good manager or have the best teammates or have a good experience. Like, I feel like I really lucked out in terms of the type of people that I was around. And, I remember saying it at, like, the awards ceremony in 2012 or 2013. I think Emily interviewed me. And I said I never understood how much of a role that chemistry played on a team until I got to play with these guys. And I think, while we'd probably all be lying if we said that, we looked at highlights of 2011 or saw them from time to time and it didn't sting a little bit. But I think we can just take joy in the process and just the amount of fun that we had together, on the field, in the clubhouse, on the road, whatever it was. And it was just a good group that I'm thankful that I got to spend time with.
Yeah, it was a fun time and a fun team. And listen, I still will maintain that with guys like Michael Young and Mike Napoli and Adrian Beltre eventually in that clubhouse, the leadership group was extremely strong. And they all did it in different ways. But, I think Michael set a tone here that has resonated for years to come about what is a teammate. And I think this club right now has the best pitching teammate I've ever seen in Nathan Eovaldi. At his level of
100%.
investment in pitchers, I think there's a big tie in there why this pitching staff has been as good as it's been this year, because he makes other pitchers better.
Yeah, you can't talk enough about him. Even, I mentioned Pat Murphy. Pat Murphy was asking questions about him yesterday because there's something about him. You watch him pitch and he catches your attention and he's clutch. And that's without even knowing the fact that when a camera is on a guy in a bullpen, whether it's rehab or whether it's just normal stuff throughout the course of a week throughout the season, Nathan Eovaldi's there for all of his teammates because he is heavily invested.
To that point, the last start that Jack Leiter made on the road, Nathan wasn't on that road trip, sent Jack a pretty detailed scouting report based on everything that he had seen and watched. And I do think that there's a direct correlation between the fact that Jack has taken big steps in his rookie year and Nathan being his teammate and kind of a guy that he's mirrored a little bit.
And during the broadcast, if it's not a night where any of them are pitching, when the camera zooms in on the dugout, who's always together? DeGrom, Eovaldi, and Jack Leiter. So you can bet that Jack is soaking up as much as he possibly can.
Well, Murph, we're going to let you go here. This is for those fans who'll be listening to this on Friday. Murph has completed his regular season in the booth for 2025, and hopefully you'll do this for years to come. You've become really good at it, and I think everybody enjoys listening to you and Dave and Jared occasionally when he's in the booth as well. So we appreciate it, Murph.
John, Evan, love talking baseball with you. Thanks for having me.
Well, that was a great conversation with Murph. It was interesting how he talked about, when we got into analytics a little bit, that he said he originally resented analytics because he thinks it shortened his career.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was penned in as a platoon guy without huge pop, and some of the analytics suggested he wasn't as productive a player as your eyes told you. Those of us who watched him knew that as the Rangers deployed him, he was a very productive player. He was a platoon guy, but, when you're talking about a left-handed hitting platoon guy, that's your strong side platoon. That's a guy who's going to get 400 at-bats over the course of the year, and he fit in very well on that team. There's just no doubt about that.
So that was a great conversation. And now it's time for the Archives in Arlington. And as I mentioned, I had teased this last week when we were talking about the Scott Sheldon playing 9 positions in 5 innings. This one is a little bit bizarre as well, I think. And it was September 3rd, 2002 at Baltimore. And those Ranger fans remember the 2002 season. It was one of the probably more dysfunctional seasons in Rangers history. Poor Jerry Naron, it was the only year he managed a full season, and he had to put up with guys like Carl Everett and John Rocker, and it was the first year of Chan-Ho Park, who did not exactly light it up. But anyway, so it was September in Baltimore, and the Rangers and Orioles are playing this night, and Aaron Mayette, long forgotten Ranger, started the game for Texas, and he threw behind Melvin Mora for the first pitch of the game and then the second pitch of the game. He was immediately ejected by a home plate umpire. He ended up starting the next night and lost. That was another great note as you're trying to come up with notes that late in the season. But Todd Van Poppel comes in. He completes the walk to Mora, and then he walks Jerry Hairston. But then he gets the next 6 guys out over 2 innings with 5 strikeouts. And in that time, the Rangers take a 4-0 lead. Going to the Joaquin Benoit, who was a part-time starter then, long reliever, comes in the 3rd. And Benoit finishes the game. 7 innings, takes a no-hitter in the 9th when Hairston tripled to lead off the inning. 87 pitches, and and the Rangers win the game 7-1. Now the predicament.
There's no predicament. It's just all about you jerry-rigging up stats.
So the official
and
official score in this case has the option to award the win to the pitcher who pitched the most effectively. Okay? So my argument to scorer Jim Henneman, longtime Baltimore favorite who passed away this year, unfortunately. My argument to Jim Henneman,
not a close friend of yours at all.
And I was.
Wait, can we get a yes or no?
Yes, Henny. I've known Henny. I knew Henny for over 40 years.
Okay.
I started this after the top of the ninth because I could kind of. And again, the Rangers had not given up a hit in the game until the ninth inning. My logic being Van Poppel pitched very effectively for 2 innings with 5 strikeouts. The Rangers take the lead, and if Benoit finishes this game, he should get the save. A 7-inning save, which would be the longest in Major League history. And, of course, I had asked Elias at this point, who has the longest save in Major League history. It was another Ranger pitcher in 1972, Horatio Pena, had a 6-inning save against California in April of that year. So Bert Hawkins must have been a great job at getting that save.
I forget? I don't remember these things. Did Mayette throw behind him
twice?
Was there something that happened the night before?
No, he just had no control, and he was mad. Yeah, he threw behind him twice.
I get it mixed up.
The first time he got a warning, and then he came right back and did it again.
I get mixed up with all the crazy stuff that's happened in Baltimore over the years.
So I got Henny to agree to award the win to Van Poppel and the save to Joaquin Benoit. And to this day, it remains the law. And Jim may have gone along with my logic anyway. I mean, again, it's his discretion.
You know what would happen? Let's also go back for a minute. You would have no opportunity to do that this day and age, would you?
No. This would have been an MLB call, and they would have told, and the teams have no real influence because on scores anymore.
MLB has, and this is a large part of why you see fewer errors now than you ever do. I think the Rangers have allowed 34 unearned runs this year. They've played great defense, but they've 34 unearned runs.
I mean, it's all geared on offense now.
But we used to, I could go to the score and say, what are you thinking there? Why was that call that? No longer. MLB has stepped in. You can't talk to the scorers. The PR guys can't talk to the scorers. The radio guys can't go down there and chastise the scorers. So none of that.
No, you can't do what I did one afternoon in Minnesota when Will Clark hit a ball. Their scorer called it an error, and in the old Metrodome, you could see the press box from the field. And I went over the score and started going. I said, I'm just doing this because Will's probably looking up to here and seeing that I'm chastising you right now. And Will, after the game, said, yeah, nice job there. You're fighting for me. But you can't do any of that kind of stuff anymore.
You can't do, nor can you be a player like Juan Gonzalez and point up to the scorekeeper with your eyes when he denied you an RBI.
Right. So, but anyway.
Fun and games with scores, John.
Benoit had a long career, pitched 16 years, 8 with Texas. But that's the story of the 7. And in this day and age, they probably would have given the win to Benoit because he certainly.
There wouldn't have been a save.
It would have been. He was unbelievable for 7 innings. And when I went to Benoit after that game, I told him, look, here's what happened. You're not getting the win, but you have the longest save in Major League history.
What was his reaction?
He smiled.
He was he is a very nice man.
So, and the anniversary real quick, this will be September 12th, the day that this podcast drops. In 1993, September 12th was Nolan Ryan Day at Arlington Stadium. And he actually pitched the game against Minnesota, 5 2/3 innings. We lost the game, and then he had to come out for an hour-long ceremony on the field where we had Sandy Koufax was there. I think Reggie Jackson showed up. Roger Clemens and Danny Darwin got the day off from Boston. Gene Autry came. We gave him a big longhorn steer that we brought out on the field. And Nolan, as Nolan was, put up with everything. And that turned out to be the last time he ever pitched in Arlington because he got hurt in Seattle, never got to finish. So that will be today's anniversary.
But we have to make some mention of September 11th. Why don't you just tell people very quickly, like what you went through on September 11th, 2001. The club was to play the A's that night.
Mm-hmm. And we were in San Francisco. I think, we're obviously, it's earlier in the day there. I'm sure like a lot of people in the travel party, my wife called and said this is going on. And it happened. Baseball very quickly canceled or postponed the games that night. And then it kind of became a day-by-day thing. And we got postponed on Tuesday. We got postponed on Wednesday. And then we're supposed to play in Seattle on Thursday, I believe. It was a 4-game series. Was it
Yes.
a 4-game series against the Mariners?
No, I think it was a
3 games.
3-game series, but
We had an off day. No, maybe we had an
because
off
here's what happened is when you guys left the hotel, and Doug Melvin,
Right.
who was the GM at that point in time, also understood that with no flights going, that the media was basically
Right, so you were on our buses.
yes, was basically hostage at that point in
Right.
time.
So this would have been Thursday. You're right.
And so he had made
Right.
the determination that we could ride on the buses wherever you guys went. And when you guys left the hotel, we still weren't sure
No, we weren't.
if we were going to
right. And
Seattle
or
or
we
driving
drive
30
back
hours to Texas.
Yeah. And, Major League Baseball, we kept asking them for an answer. I remember Rudy Jaramillo went to the bus station because he had some family thing, and he was going to take a Greyhound bus back. So he had already left he wasn't going to Seattle with us. And so we picked up Rudy
At the bus station.
at the bus station because once we kind of left the hotel, MLB did make the decision, yes, we're postponing those weekend, all the games for the
They
weekend
made that
series.
after the NFL
Right.
made their decision.
Right, exactly. And so we were under the impression we were going to have to bus all the way back on 2 buses.
No flights were going
No
yet.
flights were going anywhere. And somehow Chris Lingus, again, rest in peace, who was our traveling secretary at the time, managed to come up with a charter in Bakersfield, California. And we took one of the first flights that went out in airspace. We bussed to Bakersfield, and we were back in Texas in
Thursday
3
night,
hours.
yeah.
So it was a tough time because being in San Francisco, too, there had been talk that could have been a city that was targeted, and it was a ghost town.
There were two memories from September 11th for me. One is I was staying out by the airport in San Francisco. And, if those of you who have flown into SFO, it juts right, the runway juts right out into the bay. My hotel overlooked that runway. And so all of this takes place, and you're watching TV news, and you get the reports that airspace has been closed down. And there's just people from the hotel now who have streamed out onto the patio watching these planes come in left and right. And this is Pacific Coast time or Pacific Standard Time now.
Right.
We're getting some of the last flights. And there comes a 747, it's either Air Thailand or Air Indonesia, something like that. It was something in the Pacific. It's accompanied on either side by F-16s or F-18s. It was being chaperoned into the airport, and it was if not the last, it was one of the last flights. Then that night, I did come into San Francisco, and you and I and Eric Nadell and I think Vince Catronio, we had to eat at some point, and we went out to go eat. We went to this Italian restaurant, an old Italian restaurant. I forget the name of it, but we're sitting in the restaurant. I think it was Contadina is what it was. We're sitting in the restaurant, and all of a sudden,
Evan remembers the name of restaurants.
this restaurant had like an upper tier of seating and a lower tier, and the whole restaurant, almost in unison, starts to break out just singing "God Bless America."
Yeah.
And that was a really poignant and sobering moment.
So, well, have a good trip. Being in New York will, I'm sure, have a special meaning tomorrow, 9/11, which is now 24 years, right?
24-year anniversary.
It's pretty amazing. Well, thank you for joining us this week for Sports Day Rangers.
Don't forget to check out more sports content from the Dallas Morning News and dallasnews.com. Sports Day Insider is my podcast that I do separately with Kevin Sherrington. and usually a guest from the SportsDay staff. That also airs in the same feed every week. It drops earlier in the week, mostly now, so we can make sure we get a bunch of Cowboy stuff shoved in there after whatever their drama is that week.
And we'll see you all next week. Again, remember, we drop the podcast on Fridays. Have a good weekend.